Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, Lizzie, you wanted to talk about the last man to shoot a president. Tell us more.
So it wasn't until this week that I realized that John Hinckley Jr. really isn't a household name, that a lot of people aren't really aware of who he is or what his claim to fame is. So we're going to do a little bit of history here. So
Mhm.
John Hinckley Jr., back in the 70s, I believe it was in 1976, 77, was a college student at Texas Tech University, right? He watched the movie Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro and a young Jodie Foster. And in that movie, he fell in love with Jodie Foster, became a stalker, started writing her all kind of I love you with you. Oh my God, you don't have to be a prostitute. This is what I can do for you. And then in 1981,
Oh, I love Jodie Foster.
final Destiny
Well done.
checked
Repeat that. Repeat
into
that,
the
Liz.
wait,
Your
what
your
happened?
internet your internet's dropping again. Can you repeat that? Go ahead.
I think you're doing this. I think you're doing this. I think you dropping my internet on purpose. Um, so what did you not hear? Where did I leave off?
The last part you said was about
Jodie Foster.
you said Jodie Foster. Yeah, you were going about
Okay, so he was in love with Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster was in the movie Taxi Driver, in 1976 with Robert De Niro. Right, fell in love with her, began writing her a series of letters, kind of like stalkers do, declaring his love. In 1981, he, left Texas, moved to Washington, D.C., checked into the Washington Hilton, right? And, and at the Washington, there was some type of event involving the then president, President Reagan. And that's where he shot President Reagan, tried to kill him, tried to assassinate him in an attempt to impress Jodie Foster. But not only did he shoot President Reagan, who did survive, thank goodness, who did survive, but he also shot three other people, three of
hmm
Reagan's security detail. And so here we are 40 later, and a judge ruled last week, in June, that John Hinckley would be eligible not only for release, but unconditional release, meaning that he
Mhm.
doesn't have to check in for anything. He doesn't have to check into a psychiatrist, psychologist. He doesn't have to check into a parole officer. He doesn't have to. So he was eventually convicted, right, of shooting the president and three other people. But it was not guilty by reason of insanity. He was deemed to be have some type of schizophrenia. And with that, he was committed to St. Elizabeth's Hospital here in Washington, D.C. Um, and with that, he was not allowed to contact Reagan, who, died several years later, decades later. But while he was still alive, he could not contact Reagan. He could not contact Jodie Foster. He could not contact any of the victims or their families. With his unconditional release in June, all of that goes away.
Mm.
He can contact whomever he wants to. Doesn't have to check in with his doctor. Doesn't have to be on any medication. Doesn't have to check in with any type of parole officer. So my question to you all is, does the punishment fit the crime here? Who do you
Hmm.
want to start with?
You know what? I'll start. So, um, and the reason I'll start is because I remember when it happened. I was not that I'm old or anything, but
Think.
I remember the day it happened. So I was a kid and I was just sitting. I think I was sitting in the living room and came over I think I forgot what I was watching. Don't even remember what I was watching, but I know as it came over the uh, TV that emergency president has been shot, and they started showing all the footage they had at the time of, it wasn't like today where everybody has a cell phone camera or everybody has some type of footage of what happened because picture or something. There really wasn't a lot of footage. We didn't. I don't even think we have. I looked for it, looked for pictures of the actual shooting or Hinkley near him or anything like that. I couldn't find it. Um,
I don't remember seeing pictures of Hinckley, but I remember when we were younger, there were pictures of the aftermath where everyone was scrambling around. Those
Scrambling.
pictures
Yeah.
or those, yeah, yeah, that. The actual
Mhm.
video footage of that may have been scrubbed at this point.
Yeah, true. It
But I
might have
do
been.
remember, I do remember seeing this
Yeah, me too.
100%.
And they kept showing it all day long, but it was, I don't know, it was crazy for me at the time. I just remember it was like, oh my God, the president got shot, and my parents actually liked Reagan at the time, so they were they were Reagan fans. I don't know why. I'm sure my dad's watching right now.
I think some people thought he was handsome. Like Reagan was like an attract. Was he an actor?
He was
Yes,
horrible
he
for
Yes.
black people.
was.
He was an actor, former governor of California, diehard Republican, author of Reaganomics. Also, was a proponent of putting crack cocaine into black neighborhoods in
Hmm.
the United States.
Mm.
War on
So,
drugs. But with that
mhm.
being said, to answer your question about Hinckley, he shot a president. I mean, I don't know why we're releasing anybody. I don't even see the reason to be releasing him at this point. What is the goal? I mean, he committed a crime, an egregious crime. We don't want to. The whole purpose of putting people in jail is so that others understand. Well, there's punishment, but others also understand the consequences. So
Mhm.
if we're looking at, hey, I can shoot a president, and however many years it's been, that was in the '80s, so we're not more than 30 years, right? 40 years? Okay, 40 years. So 40 years later, I can get off. You know, what's to stop another person from trying an assassination attempt? So I don't
And
know.
then he killed three. I mean, not killed, but he shot three other people. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, the president, but and then one of them died like
Yeah,
30
and
years later.
Brady, who
Well,
go ahead. Liz.
including James Brady was his press secretary at
Mhm.
the time. And
Yeah.
as a result of the shooting, he was paralyzed in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And as a
Yeah.
result, he and his family petitioned and introduced the Brady Bill. That's how we got the Brady Bill. So a
Some
lot
level of gun
came,
control.
so a small level of gun
Oh,
control. Um, but a lot came out of this. It wasn't just like Neo said, yeah, he shot the president. But in addition to the president, there were three other people shot. Four
wow.
people with the intent to
Mhm.
kill. Four people. Rob?
It's it it's mind blowing. It really is. That the fact who someone who targeted a high profile target like a state leader of your nation, the state leader of your nation, is now out walking the streets, and it's going to be like I said, it's going to be an unconditional release. And he was living with his mom. I know he had certain check-ins and things that he needed to be doing, but I, the to be able to pull off something like that, to even attempt something
A
like
lot.
that, there's clearly something not right with you. I don't really believe that he should be out free and out roaming. Like Neo said, part of the incarceration is to show others the negative impact of your actions. Um, that being said, if the plan isn't to rehabilitate this person, but just to incarcerate them, why would you pass that burden on to the taxpayers? Because it's expensive. We
Hmm.
shouldn't even be talking about John Hinckley walking out on the street because that story should have ended 40 years ago. And even as a Canadian kid, I do remember this story hitting the media because we share a border, we share a lot of commonalities, and when Reagan was shot, he was a very popular president, even in Canada. So just because he was high profile, he was an actor. People knew who he was. So it was, yeah, it's a little messed up. And what I don't like either about this is that Hinckley currently lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. And if you take a look at the gun violence stats in Virginia, you'll find that it's crazy. So despite the
Yeah.
fact that certain checks and balances have been put in place within the last couple of years in the state of Virginia, doesn't stop the fact that there was small arms proliferation leading up to this. So it might be difficult for him to buy a handgun or a weapon legally, but there's tons of legal
But
stuff that's available. There's
but
tons of black market
yeah,
stuff that's available.
but but
Yeah.
and
Street.
and a lot of what the judge in this case said was they believe that um he is no longer schizophrenic, that his manic episodes are in remission. However, I believe it was like maybe 5 or 6 years after he was was convicted. I don't even know the proper term, but was deemed not guilty by reason of
Is of
insanity.
insanity.
They they were doing, frequent check-ins with him, and they checked his room at St. Elizabeth's, and he had over 200 pictures of Jodie Foster. And so
Ew.
they had to, go back and say, okay, we're going to remove all your pictures and we're going to put you on lockdown for the next decade. And then after that happened, they slowly but surely started to let him off the premises. At that point, he had over 200 visits throughout Washington, D.C. Now, granted, they were supervised visits, but again, this is someone who shot the president.
Hmm.
He was allowed to go and visit his parents, eventually going to stay with his parents. Now
Mhm.
he's doing YouTube videos because he wants to be a musician. Like, for me, I'm just like, where is the punishment? Like, no, he didn't go to jail. And yes, I do believe that there is some mental illness there. But at the same time, he should be treated for that illness because at one point, he was so violent and aggressive that he tried to kill 4 people. He should be treated for that mental illness for the rest of his life.
With
Because
Gianni.
now we're talking about, okay, what if he sees Gianni Storm on the street and wants to impress her?
He becomes a stalker of mine.
Of
Yeah.
your-
One of
But
no.
Gianni,
One
what do
of
you make of
many.
all this? What do you make of all this, Gianni?
Kind of to argue his case, I will say I do believe that, like you guys said, one, he is insane. He has schizophrenia, and two, he also participated. Like he did what he was supposed to do. He wasn't aggressive or anything like that. As far as the record show, he wasn't aggressive, and he didn't show any violent behavior throughout his entire stay at the mental institute. So I feel like he did what he was supposed to do, um, and he's also I feel like almost like the law happened the way it was supposed to. It's just that we may have like a personal feeling about it because it was like obviously a disgusting act. I feel like
And to her
I
point,
don't know.
to Gianni's point, I mean, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. So, if he
But
can,
that's
I
to
guess
me,
it comes down to showing if he's no longer insane and he's safe to be
Right.
out into the community.
but how can you gauge
But
if
he
someone's
shouldn't
no
be.
longer insane? Like, you never, if you've already done this and you have been declared to have some form of schizophrenia, you don't know what the trigger is going to be. And so my issue is with the initial sentence to begin with. I think it should have been
Mhm.
much more harsh than we're just going to periodically check in on him to see if he's getting better. We're talking about something that's completely different than the common criminal
I
who's
think it
been
should stay
sentenced to 20
conditional,
to,
personally.
to 20 to life. Not for attempted
Yeah,
murder.
it shouldn't be unconditional. I
Not
He
feel
for
was
like that's where
found
they went
not
wrong.
guilty, though. I mean, to Gianni's point, he was found not guilty.
and I'm
But he
saying
is mentally insane.
that's my issue. I don't think the punishment was harsh enough because we're not
You feel
talking
like he
about the
should have
average
been.
person. I should have been life in a mental institution. Listen, he was living the life. It's not like, he was in shackle. He was living a good life at St. Elizabeth's.
Yeah, that was our
Okay.
stupid justice system in the '80s, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I think they started to get away from that not guilty by reason of insanity plea more often than not. But
But that was
Or to have,
recent that the judge granted him unconditional. That was a recent thing. Unconditional
and
release.
he's
Mhm.
the
So
only, I mean, granted, other people that have shot presidents in this country, they got. But, he's the only person so far who has been afforded this luxury. And let me tell you this, if John Hinckley Jr., even in the 80s, if John Hinckley Jr. had been a Muslim,
I mean,
If his
Oh,
name was
hell.
Muhammad Akbar, do
Ooh,
you really think
yeah.
all right,
that
let's
we
get
would
to,
be having this conversation today?
all right, we can continue this later in the after show, but let me get to these comments online. So Patrick Woyan joined. He says,
Hey, Mayor.
if Hinckley had shot anyone besides Reagan, he would have been out years ago. He also said, and being in the forensic ward at St. E's is as bad or worse than being in prison.
Mhm.
Not when he was
Oh,
allowed to
wow.
leave 200 times. Not when he was allowed to leave 200 times and go visit his parents and go and have walks in the park. But I do acknowledge what Patrick said in that if it hadn't been the president, he would have been out years ago. But that's another fault of our justice system. That's
Yeah.
another like
Yeah.
But, I
people
mean,
who
I
are
want, I
attempting
want
to
to.
murder folks
I mean, he's
should
making
not.
some really good points right now. I want to mention. He says,
I can't see because my damn computer is acting a fool, so I can't see anything that
Well, that
anyone's writing
explains the
right now.
breaks in.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So schizophrenia, he says schizophrenia can be treated, and with him, it is being treated. He's stable and hasn't been a threat to anyone for decades. He says, I've been to St. E's. By no means is it a good life. Wow. Okay.
Yikes.
No one's saying that it was a good life, though. No one's saying that it was a good life.
But
But as
easier compared.
as a member of the public, I want to have a good life and not be threatened by someone who was easily triggered
Okay.
That
So,
was a
by,
perfect.
okay, I can impress her by killing the president.
all right. So Olivia says mental illness is real, and 40 years is enough time to be rehabilitated. So I don't think we would have to know what state Hinckley is in now to know if it's fair. Um,
What?
Mike Winter says that is not the purpose of jail everywhere. Jail is
Mhm.
about being punitive, or is jail about being punitive, or is it about rehabilitation? That's a deeper question.
It's
That's
a
a
deeper question,
We should
and
ask that in the after show.
people need to remember that the initial purpose of jail had nothing to do with rehabilitation. So that is a
True that.
definition that has evolved over the years. It was
All right,
all about punishment and protecting the public.
we gotta start moving on. So just one last comment. He had the best defense. This is Jacqueline Robinson. His parents' money could buy. Meanwhile, Sirhan has been in a
Mm,
real prison for decades after
mm,
killing Bobby
mm,
Kennedy. Um,
mm.
so that's a
Take
good
heed
point.
of the names, people. John Hinckley versus Sirhan Sirhan.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
Mike Winter says to me, "You old," apparently
What?
because I remember.
Listen, Mike Winter is just as old as us.
That's
It's
true.
a year. There's a year's difference. That Bama old.
Mike Winter is.
That Emma.
All right. Let me just do one thing real quick. All right. My
Gosh, I
own
don't know.
stuff dies. All right. So thank you, Lizzie. Great discussion. Appreciate that.
Truth, lies,
All right, now let's
shenanigans.
get to
What are we
what
calling this? What are we
oh,
calling this?
let's what are we calling this?
That's why I need a bullshit, guys. That's why I need a bullshit one,
Where's
man.
my truth?
I'm just gonna say, hated it, hated it,
I'm going with truth.
Hated it.
I'm okay with him.
hated it,
I'm okay with the decision.
hated it.
I'm okay with the decision. I'm all right.
Listen, I live near Anthem, which is a concert venue over here at the waterfront. Don't
Gianni
let me
convinced
see
me.
that motherfucker down at Anthem. Don't let me see him walking down at Anthem and be like,
Gianni
You're gonna.
convinced me Gianni and Patrick convinced me that I'm good with it.
nah, I'm not good with
Oh
it.
gosh.
Sorry.
Y'all
I'm just trying to
can,
I'm
play
not good
devil's
with it.
advocate.
but you're good. You convinced
You
me.
live,
You did a good job.
I'm not good with it at all. Not good
All
with
right.
it at all.
He's insane, Liz. He's crazy.
That's why he needs to be separated from the rest of
All
us.
right, let's get to the next one. All right.
Okay.
All